Hey everybody, welcome to Colbyashi Maru. I'm Colby Fayok, your host, and Colbyashi Maru is where we take the world's developers and give them the most logical web tools and give them a challenge, make sure that they can get through it in an hour. And that was the first time I tried that little line, so a little bit botched, but I think we're okay for now. So today we have Stephanie Eckles. She's going to work through themeable layouts with Sass and 11ty. Super excited for this one. It's also a super secret project. So let's see how that goes. So I'm going to bring on Stephanie. Hey, Stephanie, do you want to give a quick
Hey,
little intro?
absolutely. So, yeah, I'm Stephanie Eckles. I'm most places around the web as 5T3PH, which I've had since I was a teenager. So, thought I was pretty elite back then. Um, it was a different world on the web. Um, and I've been a front end developer, mostly front end focused, for over 13 years at this point, in terms of in a somewhat professional capacity in that time. And I, yeah, I love everything front end. So the project we're going to build today, I thought of, I don't know, I tweeted about it, I think Sunday night. um, because my response to being in a pandemic has been to create way too many side projects. So here we are.
I know the
Um,
feeling. That's awesome, though. Yeah, I'm excited. And you have a course coming up on Egghead. Do you want to give a quick little shout out to that?
yeah, so I've been an ACAD instructor since sometime last spring. And so this will be my first full length course. It will be covering how to style the most common form field types in an accessible way, in a themable way. If you're familiar with my series on modern CSS.dev, it will be taking that 4-part series and expanding it to a more design system minded viewpoint so that you can pick it up and more easily um, use it across your projects, hopefully.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's super important, especially because like forums are like the building blocks of communicating on the web. So I'm excited to see that come out. So uh, if you're ready, cool. So just a quick rundown of what to expect for everybody. So for Colbyashi Maru, we're going to take an hour. We're going to let Stephanie try to work through her project and see if she can finish in time. If not, we'll see what the end it looks like. If there's a little bit to go, maybe we'll just run a little bit over. Otherwise, we can, kind of wrap up and see where she would take it next. But through that time, she's going to kind of talk out loud and talk about what she's doing. I'll ask questions along the way. And if any of you fine guests have any questions, make sure you send it in the chat and I'll definitely field those questions for you. So without further ado, if you're ready, I'm going to pull up the screen and then I'm going to start the timer in 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
All right. So, if anybody caught my spoiler tweet this morning, you may have seen this. What we're going to build is a. I was thinking that I wanted a place to put some of my favorite snippets that I also think are valuable for teaching modern CSS. So, the idea with this project is that it will be sort of a snippet repository of the most minimal snippets you can get away with for layouts and components. Not to be clever, but to help as an educational tool for what modern CSS offers to us. So that's our goal at the end of this. Another thing that I've sort of fallen in love with over pandemic time is 11ty. So we are going to build this with 11ty, and that's going to be our starting point, is to get 11ty set up. So if you're not familiar with 11ty, it is a static site generator. It has zero client side boilerplate JavaScript. So that's one of the biggest differentiating features. If you hear static site generator, you may have used like Gatsby, for example, would be a polar opposite of what 11ty is going to allow you for setup out of the box. Um, I love it because it is just our fundamental web technologies. Um, so yeah. Anyway, let's see how it works.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
the
I've heard a lot of great things, but I never actually dug into it. So I'm excited for this.
well, we hopefully have some good questions, I'm sure. um, so the little demo page I have out here is literally the most basic we can do. No templating applied. Nothing's applied here for 11ty. So we are starting from ground zero. on this. The first thing that so what I do have set up so far, I've just installed 11ty. I've only set up a very essential start and build script, and we're going to build, add some more dependencies so that we can also add Sass into this project. And
Cool.
that's going to help us with some of our theming goals. So,
Quick question from the audience is,
yes.
how does 11ty compare to Jekyll? Are those similar?
I personally can't answer that. I have not worked with Jekyll. One thing I have heard is that 11ty is faster, but other than that, in terms of
That's always
generating
good.
your content, but I personally can't speak to that.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that if you go to Twitter and search built with 11ty, you're going to find a lot of very excited people telling you about lots of ways that they've used it. And I'm sure there's probably somebody talking about a comparison as
That's
well.
awesome.
Cool. So as you can see, just for this far, I really almost have nothing in my, the only thing that really matters here for building my site right now is my index, So one customization that I like to make that's completely optional because you can put all of your site files in the root. But a customization I like to do is go ahead and add the 11ty config and make the small adjustment to update my input and output directories. So totally a matter of personal opinion, but that's, probably a pretty standard expectation of something you can do is make that kind of modification. So let's go ahead, I'll save that, and we'll create our source directory. Get our index moved in there instead. So we could keep going just exactly like this. I could do truly static HTML, CSS. I don't have to add any other packages. I don't have to add any other features of 11ty if I don't want to. But actually, since I have my start command set up, we can go ahead and run that. So at least we're running out of our new source directory. You can see it pops open localhost. It's using, it comes with browser sync. So you can see that it's giving you all that goodness that browser sync has to offer.
So that's similar to like the Gatsby or the Next.js,
yeah.
if people are familiar.
Yep, so you get that hot reload. You don't have to set that up separately. Prior to finding 11ty, I was WordPress dev. And then kind of in an in-between point, I kind of grabbed Gulp before I found 11ty. And now I've dropped Gulp. Don't need it. 11ty gives me what I was using Gulp for. So just as another kind of comparison, it's a nice upgrade, I think. I'm biased at this point. So like I said, we could just completely go static here and that'd be totally fine. And then at this point, if you do that, you're essentially just using 11ty to handle, again, maybe what you would have done a gulp config for, like bring in browser sync and things. But instead, what we really want to do is take advantage of 11ty. And the first way to do that is to implement some templating features. So I'm going to wipe out my index here. And in addition to that, I'm going to change it to a markdown file. Now you can see it's kind of going along. It already regenerated it. There's going to be nothing in there because I wiped it out. But that was successful. It still created the index file out of my markdown. So I didn't have to add any other dependencies. That's just provided. So
and it was fast.
Go ahead.
And it was fast.
Yes, like that. I didn't even have to restart. It just happened, which is also pretty awesome. So I said I was going to take advantage of templating features. So the next thing that I want to add, I'm in my source directory, because remember we updated to that for our input directory. And I'm going to create one of the expected file system directories. And there's not very many of these. As I mentioned, you could go completely static. So the other thing is you can add features only as you need them. You at no time, need to add templating if that's not something that works for your project or, is needed by you. But if you do want templating, the expected directory for that is the includes folder. So it has an underscore as well. And kind of a convention that's emerged, if you look at starters and tutorials out there, is for this most essential template. We're going to call it base dot. And again, any templating language. I'm now going to switch to not any templating. There's 10 different ones. So basically any templating language. There's even people, it's not inherent to it, but there's people working on being able to do like MDX and
Oh wow,
components and things like that.
that community is really blown up lately.
Yeah. It's only about 3 years old too, if anybody was wondering.
That's crazy.
So I'm going to use Nunjux. So the extension for that is NJK. You will also find that the majority of, if you find a tutorial and things, even though there's 10 available, you're probably going to encounter mostly Nunjux or Liquid. And we'll get into why later when we need to take advantage of that. Okay, so I'm in VS Code, so I'm going to use my handy Emmet to populate my nice HTML5 boilerplate. By the way, it took me until a few months ago to realize that was an Emmet suggestion, and it's changed my life. So
I still haven't installed Emmet. I might need to do that.
oh, yes, big recommend. Cool. So now, we didn't populate anything in index, but as you might expect, since it's a markdown file, I shouldn't say as you might expect. You might be familiar with some other tools. Like I do have familiarity with Gatsby. Being able to use front matter and things. I'm sure that's common in a lot of generators. So we're going to go ahead. Let's just add a nice title. We'll give it the name of this nice project and content just to make sure that we get our template working. So, but we need to attach it to our template. And I'm saying template, I need to adjust my terminology. I'm used to template from past life. In the scenario that we're trying to do right now, the term would actually be a layout. So we include that layout key in our front matter, and we assign it to the full file name of that base. So again, if we come over here, we still have a blank page because we haven't actually told that content where to go. So again, this is a Nunjux file. So the templating format that I'm going to use is based on that. So for Nunjux, to pull a variable, which is going to come from my front matter, it's going to automatically be given to me. The front matter data is automatically going to be passed along to the template. I'm going to pull my title as the document title. And then we'll go ahead and step out kind of our standard. Again, I'm using Emmet to speed this along. We need the speed in this challenge. So we got our header, we'll pull in our title. And for now, we'll just do a nice main element. And so in order to get the body here, I called it content. I'll say hello just to make sure we know that it's our real content and not the variable outputting itself. But we'll use the provided variable of content. And then another important thing to do here is to use the safe filter, which means any of that detected or generated transpiled, I'm not sure the right word, content that the template's retrieving from the markdown being compiled. There we go, compiled. If there's any HTML there, we want it to output. Otherwise, it's going to, I'm losing all my terms, I'm going too fast. Anyway, it will appear on the page as, it will not output the HTML as HTML elements. Anyway.
Okay. In code, right? Or escape.
Yeah,
something
there
like
you go.
that. Yeah.
That's the one. So I just went over to my browser here and I didn't even refresh. We've already got now our content rendering. So at its most essential level, being able to pull in that front matter data and then knowing about the content and the safe filter, at this point, we could build our whole site right here. So again, if
That's
you're doing
really
a very simple, yeah, it just works. So if you're doing something super simple, and you didn't need any other content types, any special data features, here you go. This is the setup you're looking for. So we obviously want a couple other things. I mentioned that the goal of this particular site is I want to be able to add snippets. So code samples, a little bit of metadata about them. Actually, forgot I made this. This is kind of what we're going for. This is a very rough, just planning document that I have here. So this is the kind of arrangement we're going for, like a title, some sort of like tagging system for just the few flavors of stuff we want to bring in here. Probably room for description, definitely room to show the snippet. Um, I want to actually output, of course, what that snippet produces. So that CSS, what effect does it have on elements? So that'd be our example or our demo. And then a cool thing that I've seen that fits my purposes is that that demo is resizable. So you can really see like what effect is that CSS having on the layout. So we'll hopefully get to that styling.
Awesome.
And then future ones that I know we won't quite get to today, but I'd love to link to my tutorials that can give you a little bit more reference. And then also CodePen as a way that you can automatically launch a pin. So I will eventually add that. You'll have to look back later.
And I can include them in the description later once you get there.
Yeah. There you go. So this is kind of our just hit list of what we're going to continue doing. So we did our base HTML and the 11ty setup. So now we want to create our snippet collection. So back over in our 11ty. So collection is an 11ty term. If you come from WordPress world like I do, you may be familiar with the tags concept and how that can give you essentially a collection of items. 11ty is going to use the same convention of tags. There's a couple other things we want to do. You may have noticed that, well, we only have one bit of content, so it might be hard to notice, but whatever we put into our input directory, we named this index, so that automatically became index.html. So in other words, your file system is automatically mirrored as your output. So for my snippets, I want to create a snippets directory. And we'll add one just so we can see what I just talked about. So again, any file type here, we'll just say I'm a snippet for now.
Yeah, I really like the file system API. Like I know Next.js has that and Gatsby recently added it. I haven't played around with it yet, but I feel like it makes it intuitive to kind of like work with your project.
That's definitely something I super struggled with not having available at the time that I was a Gatsby user. Otherwise, I mean, there's definitely, right tool for the job, right? So it was appropriate for what I was doing at that time. Snow, did I pluralize it? Yes. So yay, we have our snippet. Beautiful.
Nice.
However, just as I was concepting this, just as a preference for this particular project, I actually do not want the output of the individual pages. I want it to just be a single page site. So in this case, my goal for this content is basically just a different way to provide data. Since I'm not bringing it from a CMS, I want it to be a little more complex than I might hold in a JSON array or something like that. So another super cool feature is a concept of a data directory file. So you can see I'm inside my snippets directory. I'm going to give it the same name as the directory. And here, I'm going to get an error at this point. So we probably will have to restart after I do this particular part. But in here, so if you recall on the wrong button. On the index, I had to explicitly define in my front matter the layout. So instead, one of the things we can do in our data directory file is we can define the layout. So this saves you essentially duplicating stuff that you would otherwise have to put in front matter. You can put in the directory file instead. However, I did mention that we are not going to produce unique pages, but that we wanted this to become a collection so that we could reference it as a collection of data, a collection of these snippets. So for this, we are going to use our directory data file to assign every snippet that ends up in this directory to the snippet tag. Snippet, snippet, snippet. I'm going to say that a lot today. It's getting weirder. Okay. And the other thing that I'm going to do in order to prevent the individual pages from being created is I'm going to make use of the permalink structure. Now this is unique to 11ty collection. And one way you could handle this if you were going to output these is you could use this to provide a common base. Maybe snippets is not what you wanted, or maybe you wanted it to be directly off of the root and not have that prefix there. But in this case, I'm actually going to set it to false. And this is going to, if I wipe out my public directory and resave, now I'm no longer generating the snippets directory in those individual pieces. So now I've essentially allowed, as I mentioned, this to become a data collection that I can use wherever I want. And I'm now completely in control of where it's going to output on the site.
So just to reiterate, the snippets.json is kind of a config for that directory.
Yeah,
cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So before we get quite to our styling, since snippet is essentially our main content here, we need to consider a little bit more about its templating. I'm like glancing at the clock. Let's see if we can get through our 11ty in about 10.
Yeah, I was going to let you know once 40 minutes was up.
Yeah. Perfect. So some of this might go a little fast. Some of it is definitely, we're going to push the templating just a little bit more than you maybe typically would. So hopefully you learn something new and get excited to try out 11ty for something crazy you want to do as well.
I think we're, so far even, because we got a comment from Dave where, most of the time you see 11ty projects, they don't actually start from scratch. So it's helpful to even see that part of it.
Perfect. Awesome. Glad to hear it. I'm kind of an ambassador for 11ty, I think, at this point. I also have, if you're interested in more, 11ty.rocks have some other resources specific to 11ty there.
Nice.
Cool. So I'm going to do a couple things here on my snippets file. Actually, let me wipe out some of these things. I hid my open. Nope. Okay, so what I would like to do is update this to an actual file that we want to end up in our system. I'm going to call this particular one small CSS grid and make it an Nginx file instead. So we need to, if I go back over here so we can connect some dots, we need to basically model this content. And there's definitely a variety of ways you could go about doing this. And we're going to stick some of it in front matter, and then we're going to output some of it in the content body. And I'm going to copy paste just to speed this up a little bit, and we'll talk about it.
And just, we just hit 40 minutes.
40 minutes. All right. Okay, so we've got our title, description, and then since we're using the tags concept for holding our snippets collection, we're going to create our own key here to hold those additional, these guys that we want to actually end up in our template. So hopefully that's kind of makes sense what we're doing there. The next thing we're going to do is something a little bit more complicated. We're going to create a layout partial so that we can pass in the snippets for the CSS and HTML that we want to end up in our layout. So here's what we're ultimately going to go for. Let me give myself some more room. We're going to create a partial called code that's an Nginx file. And we're ultimately going to pass into it, have the ability to pass into it some HTML and then some CSS. That way, as I'm creating these snippets, I can have a similar format for them. Again, there's other ways that you can do this. This is what I landed on in the little bit of prep time while thinking about this. So I should actually, let's give it my real content for this one. And then we'll create the partial to output it. So there's that. That's the HTML I wanted. And now we need to create this partial. So similar to our layouts, partials also go in our includes folder. And if this is looking a little unfamiliar, um, this is courtesy of the Nunjucks templating. So
Mhm.
whatever language you decide to use, you essentially retain those features of that templating language. Um, there are some ways that 11ty has, I think, extrapolated or kind of uniformly made certain things available, like filters that we used on that safe filter. But other things are probably still unique to language. I can't speak to all 10, though. So we're going to create our code.njk partial. And essentially these, we're basically setting variables here. And just kind of inherent to how Nunjucks is going to work, it's going to allow this partial to pick those up. So I'm going to add the disclaimer, I may change my mind on this setup later. But for ease of kind of the snippets, since they're going to each have their own unique CSS, and the fact that HTML5 lets us drop a style tag anywhere we want, in case you didn't know that. Not recommended, generally speaking, but for this, it kind of seems like a good solution for now. I'm going to drop that in. So we're going to get our CSS here, but also we're going to get it as, you can see I've got it code fenced here. We're going to get it within our code snippet so that ultimately in a minute, we're going to add highlighting to this. And that's all going to kind of come together magically. Probably makes sense. You're like, how is this happening right now? But we'll get there. Maybe. We only have a little bit left. Cool. So nothing's going to output quite yet because we haven't, if you remember, we removed the ability to create these pages. So we have nowhere that this is currently showing up. So
Right. Yeah.
we are going to go back to our index because this is where we want things to show up. Now, initially, I created this as a markdown file. Most often, that's my preference for just straight content. But if you want to use some templating features, you will occasionally hit a snag. You can intermix layout template languages. But to be a little more safe, we're going to go ahead and update this to Nunjucks because what we're going to do is create a loop that goes through our snippets. So now
And that's probably where MDX will come in handy once that. Yeah.
Different things like that. Yeah, I would probably do this a completely different way if I had that available. But again, most of the time, like this is probably a little more complex content structure than I would typically do. But anyway, I'm not going to go into that because we don't have time. You could look at some other examples I have out there though. Anyway, so we're going to do a for loop is how this is handled. So for snippet in, so this is now like a local reference as you would kind of expect from probably doing for loops in other languages. And now we're going to reference the special 11ty collections, whatever data object, I guess. And off of that, because of the tag that we created, we can get our snippets. And we'll make sure we end our loop so we don't have an issue with that later. Okay, good. We don't have any errors. We're still moving along. So let's
So
go ahead.
just a quick question. So the collection snippet, is that because you defined the config file or because it's in that snippets directory?
Great
Because you
question.
made the tag.
It's specifically because of the tag. So the directory alone will not create a collection.
Okay.
So you're still kind of essentially opting in to that collection being created. Great question. So now we will reference our current item. And then one little trick here in this particular instance, since we're not sending it to a template. So if you recall in our base template, since we were sending our index to it, it already could pick up on that front matter data. It was already just made available. But since we're inside of a for loop and who knows what, this could be, there's probably other reasons, but we have to dive one level into the data. So 11ty, you can output this like in your config or something. All of these things end up being in a data model attached to whatever content type. So this is how we'll retrieve, for example, our title. Let's double check that we actually get, oh, I need to go back to my home page. All right, I should have made this off to the side. Or do I have an error? Let's restart for good measure. I always do this for loop wrong, so I probably did have a syntax error here.
That reminds me of one of my first like bigger web dev jobs. I had to work in a language called Template Toolkit, which was for Perl. And the very first time I pushed out code, I took down the site because I wrote else if wrong. So just a little there.
It might just be collection. I'm trying to find a, okay, what did I do? What did I do? Of course I broke it. Now I'm like trying to get on my right monitor. If anybody in the chat, because I know there were some funny folks, what did I miss?
Should the double curlies be the percentage signs? I'm not familiar with the syntax.
Good question. It is. Oh, you know what? I think I did a 4 when I need a 4 each. Let me double check. Maybe. No, I didn't. I'm double checking against another one that I had done. Oh, I said snippet. Not snippets. That'll get you every time.
Yeah.
So one downside is maybe lack of some of that IntelliSense coming through. I would love to see somebody that knows how to do that magic, make that available to us. Cool. So, all right, we're getting it though. We got it now. So now we can work on, let's see, I'm looking over my list. I'm like, do we need to prioritize? Because we want to get to some of the style, but we are running low. Let's at least get as far as, so we have our title. So another thing we can do now that we're in our for loop, let's comment that out. Let's create our structure that we actually want for these. So our semantic structure. Right now I'm thinking article probably makes sense for what we're trying to do. So we'll move this guy into
nice
here.
And semantic.
Ta-da. We want to output a description. In this case, I don't, so you can see that if you're using Nunjucks, by the way, side note, if you try to get started on this, you do have to specifically add in your VS Code a setting to allow Emmet to work for Nunjucks. So pro tip there. I think I have it in an article on 11ty Rocks. Note about that. So we'll do the same thing here, bring in our data description. Cool. Oh, did I call it something else or did I not add one? Or can I not spell again? I shoulda, oh, I'm missing my closing tags. This is what high-speed pressure will do to you. Miss those little bits. It's always a semicolon. Now it's always a curly in this context.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I was wondering if that was the issue. So inside of the for loop, you use the double curlies.
Yes, and maybe there's if anybody knows a VS Code, like, so I have like completion for regular HTML tags, but I need one for template tags. That would save me so much. Okay, so we're not going to quite get to outputting the code probably, but one critical feature that we are clearly missing is CSS. So let's at least get as far as to one method of how you can bring style into your 11ty project. The first important thing to know about that is that currently, this may change, but currently CSS as a file extension is not recognized as a file that gets automatically passed through. So if you add it in like style and you create CSS, it's not going to automatically go. But we're going to start there. We're going to do Sass, but we're not going to get that far. So we will do style, CSS, and we'll do style. And let's make a change Perfect. That's all any site needs, really. Um, and in order for it to recognize that we have that available as a file, I didn't remember where my right window was. So we were going to add the full Sass, but we're going to just grab the part that will pass through our styles. So in our 11d config, we need to add our, in this case, CSS file, since we didn't make it Sass. We need to add it as a watch target. So that way, as we make changes, it will be picked up and automatically pushed through at that point. And also as a, so we added a watch target and also pass-through copy. So the pass-through also means then go ahead and pick that up and move it to our output directory. So did we?
Okay, so that won't even do any kind of like compile process. It'll just kind of pass it through.
Correct. Yep.
Cool.
So this project that I had open out here, I do have a Sass skeleton. We were going to grab the other bits from it, but it gets you set up with the actual Sass processing if that's something you're into. And it also has includes CSS Nano and auto prefixer and that goodness. So, but at least in this case, so you can see I didn't even have to restart it. We now have our style pushing through. Now, of course, it's not going to apply because we need to link to it. And this is the other place where Emmett saves my day now that I know that this exists. I know I have to
really gonna need to
remember that.
Yeah. I'm gonna really need to dive into Emmett.
Yeah. Highly recommend again. So for our purposes, since we're not going to have to worry about this template being applied to nested paths, because this is a one-page site, I'm just going to link to it directly, as you might expect. And yay, no refresh necessary. That's all the CSS anyone ever needs, awesome. As I mentioned. Let's just switch to sans serif.
Fair enough.
What is our time looking like? Let me see what else we...
So we have just about 25.
Okay. We're at 25 or 25 left?
25 left.
Oh, 25 left. Okay, so we do have a little wiggle room.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, before when I said 40, that was 40 left.
Oh, okay. Good deal. Good deal.
Yeah.
All right.
So
I'm scanning
about
through.
25.
All right. Well, then let's go ahead and let's finish out our loop that we started for this content before we move on to further styling. So the other bits that we wanted that we need to output is our code snippet, and that's going to go in the body. We haven't grabbed that yet because we haven't. So just like in the main base template where we use the content, if I just use that here, let's see how that, except for I need to scope it to. Oh, actually, this is a slight switch in what you need here. I'm looking for that really quick. Forgot myself that I needed to handle this. I think it's template content. I should have made a note for this. We might not get that far. Again, if somebody is remembering what in the chat, what I'm missing here. Let's see.
Not seeing anything.
Like I said, I'm doing something just a little different than I normally handle content. So maybe we'll come back to that after all.
Are you able to kind of dump out or print the data of the data object onto the page?
Actually, yeah, good question. It might just be directly off of it. Yep, there we go.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so the reason this template content was important is that it's getting the compiled. So it's already been processed, that markdown, that nunjux, and then now you have the full compiled version. So you can see we have the details that we added in our template. So we at least can verify here. Obviously, it's not pretty. We verified that we're getting that content through. So in other words, the setup work that we did to create these variables and pass it into this additional partial, that's all coming together and we have it available. So one thing I definitely want to get to, our first style update that we can make is adding code highlighting. What is pretty handy is that, so Zach Leatherman, the creator of 11ty, obviously knew that this was going to be a very common need for most of his users, probably himself too, if nothing else for his documentation. So he actually has created, there's an official plugin. This is what it is. So it's scoped to the 11ty package as well, 11ty plugin syntax highlight. So that's our first step, is to install that. And then the config is where we're going to bring this in. So back in 11ty.js, we will require that plugin. And then off of our config object, by the way, I kind of skipped over this part, but we basically get the config object passed in. And then, so as we added our kind of other details here for the CSS, we also use it to add our plugin. So we're just referencing that.
Does it use Webpack to compile? Just curious.
It does not. So you can, if you need additional features like that, you can bring in Webpack. I have a different project where I brought in Parcel to help do some stuff. Okay, so I had stopped my project because to install that package, and now I've restarted it. And I do have to refresh this particular time because we had killed our connection with Browser Sync. And I thought, oh, okay, so. Oh, so one step that I missed when we had this out here, I scrolled through my notes and skipped it, is that from our partial, we are mixing, sorry, I feel like I'm probably getting a little confused. We've got a lot of rabbit trails going to make this project happen. But in order for our partial, our snippet content to come together, we ended up mixing some templating languages, because in our main snippet content here, we are using nunjux, but actually in our code here, our code partial, we are hoping that Markdown will come in at some point and help transform the content. So
interesting.
Yeah. So remember I mentioned earlier that there was a particular reason that most folks use either nunjux or liquid, particularly with Markdown. And the reason for that is that those languages can be kind of are set up to be used together the best. So either nunjux and Markdown or liquid and Markdown. And what we can do to fix this little problem where we're trying to use both is use the template engine override. And we're going to say that first we want it to be processed as nunjux, and then we want it to be processed as Markdown.
Wow, that's really interesting.
And it hasn't quite worked, I think, because we need to add an extra space. I think it's probably, and I probably need to not indent it. Let's see if that fixes it. Yeah.
Markdown can be finicky.
So hopefully you can see this. You can already see that it's made an improvement in terms of the essential formatting here, because now it's, so two things happened. One, our Markdown picked up and actually found that fenced code block, turned it into a code block. Two, our syntax highlighting plugin came in and has added all of the classes. So one pretty amazing thing about already what we have here is that this was done at build time. There's still no client-side JavaScript happening here. So whereas you might be familiar with using Prism to do syntax highlighting, even in a Gatsby context or what have you, right? There's still, it's doing it client-side. So having this pre-compiled is pretty rad, I think.
Yeah, that's nice.
So I did pre-create my Prism CSS. So let's just dump that in and we'll do it in here for now since we did not set up Sass quite yet. And let's see. Just making sure I didn't dump that in the public directory. I may have. Oh, come on, you're just a style file.
Looks like it picked up some of it. I thought I saw some of the selectors on there. Maybe not.
Yeah, the selector there. I wonder if.
Oh, is it nested in Sass or maybe not?
Oh, I was seeing if my watch target maybe didn't work or something.
Mm.
Did I? Should just be. Well, let's restart just to see if something weird happened in the caching of that. Or maybe I don't. Maybe the code classes. Maybe I grabbed the wrong file and the code classes don't match up anymore. That is possible too.
Oh, do you need the color
Oh,
variables?
you are so right. So we skipped over that part. So that would be helpful. I intended to talk about CSS custom properties, and that's how I had it set up. So that is exactly what is going wrong here. You can see some of the things have disappeared because they're intended to be over a darker background. So let me think for a second how we can quickly grab those in. Let's try to find the right spot in my notes, get those values. So my other harebrained idea earlier this week, I just get random ideas and kind of run with them.
Love it.
Was to create, I just launched it, okay, 15 hours ago. But this little
Oh, wow.
package that's intended to work with your Sass, but it also is intended to work with CSS. So I guess we can still install it and get the advantage of generating our custom properties. So let's go ahead and do that because that will be faster than me copying and pasting other things.
Is that specifically for 11ty or is this for like anything?
Great question. This is for anything. So any,
That's awesome.
it expects a tokens file. We'll look at that in a minute. And then takes over and does the rest of the work for you.
Awesome. And just so you know, we're just a little bit over 15 minutes left.
Cool. So I just installed the project. Let me clear out my editors again. So I just installed it as a regular package. Ally color tokens is what it's called. And in order to set this up, we need to do a couple of things. We need to create it's a CLI script. So specifically, so one way you can go about this is to create a additional script in your package. You can also just run it directly after you've installed it. You can run it as a node command. So we're going to call the CLI command from the package. You can do it without any options. I'm not going to thoroughly tell you how to use it right now because we don't have time. But the important thing here for our purposes, and actually we'll change it to that, is to tell it where to output. It's going to create a CSS file or a Sass file. And since it defaults to Sass, and I didn't put in my notes, and I only just created it, and so I don't have it memorized yet. So the option we want, we're going to switch it from the default of Sass to CSS. And this will give us essentially just CSS custom properties based on some data we're going to create next. Okay, so that's our basic setup. So part 2 is providing it data to use to create color tokens. So I come from the past couple years design system world, and so there's a concept of design tokens. I think that's starting to kind of come into other things. We're not necessarily building a design system, but I have a link on the package page to Gina and the creator of it talking more about what that means if you're interested. So by default, the expected file name for your tokens is color tokens. There's an option to change that. So I'm going to pop in my pre-prepared file. Looks like I am missing some semicolons. There we go. We did get the semicolons to bind us. Cool. And now I'm going to, and I was going to set up npm run all, which I would recommend for kind of cross environment compatibility, but I'm on a Mac, so I'm just going to do it this way. And if that didn't make sense, none of this made sense to me. I'm extremely new to command line, anything. Everything about this is new to me. I'm sure there's tons of ways to improve, but so don't feel like you're behind is my point. If I'm starting to say things that like don't make sense. I'm 13 years in and only I'm starting to understand this side of the house, if you will.
Yeah. Well, like, so what's happening is, so on your start command, what you're going to do is run the color token script, which outputs those variables, right? And then you'll pick up those variable files for your CSS.
Yes,
right?
correct.
Yeah.
And of course, something didn't quite work. So what did I do? May have missed a step since I was speeding. All right, so I think that it didn't actually try to run that. Oh, so since I'm now referencing at this point a custom package script, I have to still say npm run. So that was my misstep there. So we will try that again. Oh, or maybe not. Am I wrong again? Let's see why it decided not to run. Just did another install because I think it missed a package.
Will's impressed with the 13 years in, and I agree.
Thanks. Thanks, I think.
No, it's a good thing.
So I'm going to have to update my package. You know what I did is I only tested it locally and not from my exported or published version. And I think I forgot to appropriately include one of the dependencies, I think is what happened there. So
Do you think you're able to just, yeah.
Should be the only two we need, but we will see. Yay, it did it.
There we go. Nice.
Okay, so what it's doing, and I need to make one more tweak to, we'll just do it. We'll do it manually because we're not going to run it again. You can change the file name to appropriately change it to CSS. Probably should make that automatic when the output format changes. There we go. Note for me. 2 notes for me. What it has done, it has gone through our token options here, and it's going to done a couple things. It's not just created CSS properties from that. That wouldn't be really worth the effort. It's also created a contrast, an accessible contrast friendly version as well. So essentially pairs, contrasting pairs. So that's the advantage. So I only gave it red and it's given me on red as the appropriate contrast friendly text color.
Interesting.
I would love to talk more about accessibility. Hit me up later if you are baffled why this is important or anything or have any other questions. Okay, so we still, okay, so a couple things here. I'm going to cheat and just copy paste this for our purposes of continuing forward. And I'm going to grab those custom properties that created because our whole point of doing that was to try to, yay, do this. So the other change we need to make is we need to, I don't think I added, remember to add this. We need the background color. Obviously this is, speaking of contrast, not contrast friendly. There we go. I missed adding one. I need to add it as a custom property format, which comes in with the var function. And there must be another place that I need to do that as well. There we go.
Nice. Beautiful.
All right, so it looks like I didn't pre-test the theme. I just kind of stuck in my colors and it's like, we'll work it out.
The colors look great though.
Anyway, there we go. So little recap of what we just did in terms of takeaways. Number 1, 11ty, we were able to mix templating languages when we created this. So we were able to use Nunjuk templating, but also include our code sample within a markdown fenced comment, and then tell 11ty that we wanted to process both templating languages essentially individually so that they would compile together all as one and give us this output. And then the other important step within all of that was grabbing the official, they're probably more by now, but always good to use official, syntax highlighting plugin, which basically during our build step produced the, I think standard safe to say, because the template or the theme that I popped in there was a Prism template. So the classes, so that you can then apply a Prism theme or what have you. So very, very useful, very quick overall. We did some unique things.
Yeah.
I guess quick. We're still getting through it.
We have a few
hour.
minutes left. Did that CSS snippet apply to that list?
The CSS snippet.
Yeah, is that supposed to apply to the list to style it below it?
Good question. So we must have not quite had something output here. Oh, you know what? I didn't add the class.
Mm.
Still a valid thing. Yep. Good call. There we go.
There we go. Lovely.
Very good call. So ideally, what we were going to proceed to do is, throw some layout, more layout around this. I'm going to go ahead and make one change. I had forced open the details specifically so we could examine the snippet output without having to reopen it every time. So I'm going to take that off because I did say we would launch. Either way.
Is that attribute, the open attribute, is that an HTML thing or is that a 11ty thing?
Great question. Yeah, it is actually part of the native spec.
Okay.
Yeah. So, hey, we have content on the page.
Yay.
It is functioning how we want it. I think probably the one tiny tweak we'll make super, super fast is making whatever's not showing up here show up. And then we can, so I already have this set up in Netlify. Is who I'm using. And oops, see now I'm getting, what is hiding? Interesting. Oh, it's the whatever the main color is. Oh, because I changed the wrong one when I went to change the prism styles. So we'll change that back to what I think it should be. Sorry, I'm going to find what it was originally. Oh, it wasn't something. We're gonna cheat. There we go.
Well, Tro said that treating triggers the bomb under my chair.
No. All right. Well, at least it shows up. We have a snippet here. It's getting applied. Ideally, we'd throw some style on here so you could better see it. If you recall, another goal that I will add probably later tonight is being able to resize this sample. And of course, adding additional snippets. So this is a little more useful than this one. By the way, if you're not already familiar with this little guy, and I also add a better description here, maybe we'll at least link to a blog post so there's something halfway useful there.
That layout's awesome.
It's we'll say learn more for now, which we shouldn't, but we will. Good enough.
Yep.
A little more context at least.
Yeah. So what do you think you're gonna do from here?
Great question. So definitely we didn't quite get into the styling we wanted to. The package that we brought in, I need to fix a couple bugs, but I made that to make some of this theming stuff more efficient. And I'm going to, so one of the reasons for that, it'll help me talk to what I'm going to do next really, really quick. Okay, so one of the things we were hoping to talk against was Sass theming. And so this package will help you. It's built for my workflow. So I'm also interested in feedback of, does it fit your workflow? What would you change? But it creates some as variables that we can actually additionally override with Sass. So even though you've got this theme here, you still have built-in kind of Sass methods to override that down the road. It gives you a map. Don't have time to talk about it, but that can make some kind of looping, for example, to output further classes easier. And then the mixin is intended to be picked up and dropped in your root at the point you want it, rather than just outputting it directly.
Nice.
So definitely my next step is going to be bringing in Sass. But of course, in this project, we're not looking for too much more styles going on. We want to kind of just fix the general page structure layout, probably create some sort of card idea to wrap each snippet. It's going to end up being just a single page site, as I imagine it right now. You can always add pagination down the road or what have you, possibly category filtering, depending on what that looks like after I kind of get some more snippets populated. Just trying to go over here. So yeah, I mean, again, we have a functional site here.
Absolutely. No, there's a lot of good stuff in here to unpack. Even just getting the 11ty site up and running, it's so nice, and it's like a simple workflow to get up and running with, especially basic content, and not jamming all those dependencies in there.
Yes. So I know we're out of time. This is going to take 2 seconds. We're going to create a netlify.
We officially have 1 minute and 40 seconds.
We can do it though. We're going to create a toml file because previously I hadn't set my preference on the published directory. So we're just going to set that here. And now we will just, all we have to do, we'll push up our progress. Ooh, launch. Commit. See, I'm also not, I also am an advocate for using a GUI if it helps you. Definitely am not usually using Git on the command line.
Whatever makes you productive.
Yeah. So that's pushing up, and because it's connected to, I'm going the wrong way, because it's connected to netlify, and it's also a super tiny site. Oh, come on. Super tiny site. I bet it's already up there. Oh, not quite.
Almost.
It will be. Did I miss?
It compiles so fast, which is so nice. Did the internet freeze? I'm not sure if it was me or. I'm not sure if you're cutting out or am I cutting out.
Slow the one time I went fast. Oh, I can hear you fine. Oh, there we go. So now
I think you're back, yeah.
You can all go check it out now.
Nice.
Tell your friends.
I will link that.
Tell your friends to check back later.
I will link that in the comments. And you officially got it out right before the timer, and 2 seconds and game over. So nice job. Nice job. Awesome job. No, this is awesome. I love learning, how to work through 11ty. Definitely gonna need to add that to my tool belt. But yeah, so thanks for coming on. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of talk about? And also give you a chance to kind of plug your course and stuff, but anything else you wanted to kind of expand on?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. This was super fun.
Yeah.
Discovered a couple bugs. That's always good. Yeah, definitely anybody feel free to hit me up. I am always willing to talk 11ty, CSS, accessibility, anything front of the front end. So
awesome. And I linked her Twitter in the comments, so make sure you reach out if you have any questions. But yeah, thanks for coming on, and everybody make sure you follow her so you can check out her course, Accessible Forms, once it comes out on Egghead within the next couple of weeks. But otherwise, thanks everybody for joining, and thanks again, Stephanie, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.